Welcome back, Grief Nation listeners. And today on our show, we have a very special guest. Her name is Jennifer Lawlor, and Jennifer's here to share her and very important story with us with our series called The Oath. Hi, Jennifer. How are you? Jennifer Lawlor is a licensed clinical social worker for over the last 17 years. She's a mother, wife, sister, aunt, and a dear friend to many. As of December 2018, she became a survivor of domestic gun violence. She's an active volunteer and advocate with Moms Demand Action and the Ben's Bell Project of Connecticut. Jen started a foundation to honor her daughter, Emily Todd, whose life was ended by an act of gun violence at the age of 25 years old. She was humble, kind, a bright light who had recently completed coursework to become a shamanic wisdom practitioner. Emily loved unconditionally and had a deep connection to and respect for the earth. Jennifer founded Peace, Love, and M, with hope continuing to shine light for others by serving as a source of intentional kindness and compassion in community for individuals and families who are survivors of intentional violence. Let's welcome her.
Hi, I'm doing all right. How are you doing, Miami?
I'm so pleased to finally have you on the show, and thank you for actually, taking the time out of your day to come and tell us and share your story with us. So, if you could just tell us about your journey of losing your daughter, Emily.
Well, this particular journey, I am the 9th of February was 26 months since I lost my daughter, Emily, to gun violence homicide. Um, it was like any, tragedy that happens. I mean, it was so sudden and abrupt for us that I think it took several months just to even process what was happening. The person that ended my daughter's life, she had been dating for just a brief period of time, just a few weeks, and she didn't want to continue seeing him. And there's a lot in between there, but at the end of the um, chapter for Emily's life, he ended up taking her life when she wanted to end the relationship. So for me, it has been months and months of acceptance, rage, confusion, just so many different things. One thing that's always stayed the same, though, is I have not ever been angry with God. Um, I feel like he couldn't. I feel like God couldn't help it. I feel like the power of free will came in and just made whatever happen exactly when it was going to happen and exactly how it happened. Um, so it's been a long journey, and I'm kind of coming around now to getting to a place where I've started to feel a bit better because I've met some other people that have sadly experienced the same thing or something similar. The just that epic sudden loss, especially of your child. It's so unnatural. We're not equipped for that. It's not how it's supposed to be. So um, with that, I've felt stronger and stronger and stronger, and just gone on to try to use my voice in different ways, and reconnect to my daughter and feel how I can truly keep her with me as continue to live like this, in this space that's not anything what it was before that day.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so sorry that this tragedy happened to you and your family. Can you explain to us some of the details surrounding um, you receiving that initial call of what happened?
Oh dear God, yes. We I woke on the morning of December 9th to my husband telling me that Emily's car wasn't out front, and it was bizarre because we'd been with her the night before. My husband had been talking with her. My son and I, we goofing around, having a pillow fight. I didn't even think she was going to be leaving the house because she had to work the next day. And so it's real strange. And, one thing about Emily that she was pretty good about respecting is even at 25, if she wasn't going to come home, we just wanted her to let us know so that I didn't wake up with that kind of worry, be it that she could be hurt somewhere or her card broke down or whatever the case. There's plenty of ways to just communicate. And so that's all we expected from her as a young adult living in our home, was just that respect, so that I wouldn't, my husband and I wouldn't be worried for her safety. And so when I woke, that was the very first thing I did, is I looked at my phone, and my husband had already looked at his. So I was like, oh boy, here we are. This is not like her, but she hadn't done it 100% perfectly. So maybe,
Yeah.
she fell to sleep, whatever. But that day was both the shortest and longest day of my entire life as I've ever known it. I started calling her and texting her and wasn't getting a response, which was completely unlike her. We were very, very close. And then I thought, okay, maybe she thinks I'm angry with her. Let me reach out to, her dad and ask her dad to do that. And then her friends, because, maybe she's going to answer her friends. Why wouldn't she answer her friends? So she wasn't answering phone or text from anyone. And I just knew something was very, very wrong. And I got the local police department to come over to my home, and they were, as I expected them to be, they were reluctant to consider her a missing person because it hadn't been 24 hours and she was a, young adult. And so I had to really kick in some demands on that they take it seriously and to listen to a mother. That was my biggest thing. Like, you don't understand. You have a way to do your job, but I'm telling you, as her mother, there is something wrong.
Yeah.
She would never, ever do this. And so when they left my house, I really didn't know how hard they'd work on it right then, but I learned that they did because within a few hours, I received a phone call from the officer that was at my house. He asked me if I had any photos of Emily, if she had any unique markings on her, like a piercing or a tattoo. And I balked a little bit and thought, what do you want that for? Like, why is this how you're spending your time? And he just said, oh, well, she's 25. If we find her, she doesn't have to come with us, but, we'd like to know that for sure it's her.
Yeah.
Okay. So I sent by email some photos, and only to find out a few hours later when that officer and 6 or 8 other, police vehicles, I was sitting in the window looking for Emily, waiting for her to come home. And all these police officers came down my quiet little street, and they had a folder. One of them had a folder in his hand, and it was with photos of a female that had been found about 35 minutes from our home overnight at like 6 a.m. that day. And they had no ID for her, and she wasn't recognizable by sight. So they brought the photos of her at the crime scene. And that was the final way I got to see Emily's body. My last moments with her were that night before. But the following day, that's how I had to confirm for the police that they did in fact have my child in their morgue. And I just remember this just collapsing, but somehow inherently knowing that my little boy was here in the house with us. He was only 8, and my husband was out, pounding the pavement looking for her. The only clue we had of where she may be was that we had access to the sign-on information for her bank account, and I looked in the bank account and I saw that there was hardly any money left in her bank, and the area in which it had been the ATM withdrawals were made were about 35 minutes from our home. So my husband had, he would never have left me if either of us could have predicted what was going to come down my street.
Yeah.
But he took off, and he obviously couldn't take my son with him. So my son, he was home here alone with me when the police came to the door.
Jennifer, I'm so sorry that, wow. I don't think a mother, like you stated, is never prepared for that moment.
No.
And the detail that you can still remember, which is the folder in the hand.
Oh my
And
God, I'll never ever forget what that looked like.
yeah.
The folder, it's one of the only things I really remember is the folder.
Yeah.
And it's, if you've ever watched some crime scene show on, prior to Emily being killed, I used to watch TV. I no longer watch television, hardly at all, anything, because the types of shows that I would be drawn to were the ones that had some intelligence and reality to them, like as far as like Law and Order or something like that.
Yeah.
I simply cannot. It's the folder.
I get it. I get it. I totally get it. I feel the same way. I used to love the crime shows, the crime podcasts, and all of that as well. And this thing that has torn us from our family, our children, excuse me, and sometimes tears the family apart.
Absolutely.
Our whole lives have actually changed, and I'm just so sorry that you and your family are still experiencing this loss. But can you describe to me who Emily was at a young age?
Oh yes, I've spent so much time thinking about perfect words that describe Emily outside of like ones that are commonly used, and the one that always comes back to me is she just was simply magical. Like she there's not anybody that ever met her, I'm certain, and that's even without hearing from every single person, but there's not anybody that ever met her that didn't feel lucky to have met her. Just very, very, very humble and kind. She was more concerned about the earth than she was her own self. Just the things that she cared about at the age that she cared about them were just not typical. She was kind of light years ahead of where, most kids were with the things that mattered to her. And I'd like to think that some of that was passed on from my mom to me, and then from myself over to her. And Emily also has a tremendous exterior, aunts, uncles, both sides of the family that really, really have a lot of respect and love for nature, the ocean, animals. Oh my gosh. So for Emily, she just was she's always willing to give. It didn't matter. No one had to explain themselves to her. It didn't matter how many times I tried to talk to her about doing the smallest thing, which would be, Emily, if you're going to give to the homeless, why don't you go get some food instead of money? And that way we're not taking the risk of, somebody feeling tempted to, use it for alcohol or use it for drugs, or maybe it won't get stolen from them or something. And no, mom, that's not what they're asking for. And it was bump, so she was that person. It didn't matter if 100 out of 100 times somebody had said to her, those people have gotten in trouble for not being authentic in what they're asking, taking advantage of people. And, this one particular area where, these two homeless people would stay and ask for money. And she would say, oh, that doesn't matter to me. That doesn't matter to me. They must be needing it for something, because who would do that, mom? Who would do that with their time if they didn't need to?
Yeah.
That's not exactly a great way to spend your day, mom. You know what I mean? So she would
Yeah.
she would just stick right to it. And she was the best granddaughter, sister,
Yeah.
cousin, so loving.
Yeah. Emily was also a part of the shamanic community. Can you share her life there and the healing work that she started?
Absolutely. For me, it's one of my biggest sources of gratitude that I supported her with what she wanted to do with her world, because shortly before she died, she had just completed a 14-month shamanic practitioner course here at one of the local colleges. And she had already gone to 4 years of college, and we had done our best to support her and then take some loans and things like that. She had her degree in expressive arts therapy, but she wanted to do this other thing. And it was a little bit of a pushback for me at first, saying, come on now, give it some time to do something with your degree. We can't just move from thing to thing to thing to thing. And thank God I supported her, because I don't know that I'd forgive myself at this point, knowing if I hadn't, and helped her get that taken care of financially, because she was kind of in between finishing college, being able to get a job. It was very overwhelming. It's nowhere near as easy as they tell kids to, oh, if you go to college, you'll be out getting this job. No, none of those realities were true for her, and it was very depressing. So she was at a music festival, and she met the woman who is a shamanic practitioner that is the professor for this course. And it just kind of went from there. I mean, when I say she was relentless in asking me to be able to do it, and then she would starting to figure out ways she was just going to do it on her own. And I'm thankful that I did support her to do that. So in October 2018, Emily had completed that course and had plans. She was so happy, that the happiness that she had, there's absolutely no way that I'd have ever not continued to support her. So she was, she wanted to do the next level. She was also working at that point, using some of her healing methods that she'd learned. She was incorporating that into expressive arts therapy. Emily worked at a local nursing home and had done a bunch of research that wasn't the typical Western medicine kind of research, but she'd found information and brought it to her supervisor that drumming circles could improve the lifespan of people that were living with dementia, and that it could, at a bare minimum, it would improve their quality of life while they were here. And so she had just gotten the go ahead early December to proceed with, kind of just building up this program and doing her own thing. And, she had her drums, and she, she had, she had sat with the residents and had them make little shaker cups with rice and paper cups, and so that they could go along with doing some of the rhythm. And it wasn't an easy task. There's a lot of resistance and a lot of mood lability with the clients that she had, because dementia is terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible loss of control and power. And so Emily was just there to kind of like cradle them in and make them feel a little safer while they were in that space. And she did not get to do that. And I am so angry, Miami, about that. I am so incredibly angry that somebody not only took her from me, but took her from so many people that needed her kind of help.
Right.
And I'm not saying that other people won't be able to do similar things with their lives, but Emily was really, really dedicated to it. It
Wow.
wasn't about money. It wasn't about anything.
Hmm.
Um, so it,
You speak you speak my language every time you talk about Emily, and all of the spiritual work, and the practices that she did, the rituals, the drumming circles. I know when I was first reading your story, and I just kept seeing. Actually, when I was looking over the Moments to Survive story, and the picture that you chose with all the radiance and the light, and
oh
her
my
eyes
gosh,
are
isn't
these
that
piercing.
amazing? Like that just, and I have so many photos of her with this,
Uh-huh.
that the aura that's there, and there's no intent, I'm sure a professional photographer can make that happen to a photo,
Yeah.
but no, these are just the way her photos came out.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, yeah.
no
It
no
was just her
filters, no,
spirit.
just,
Yeah.
she was just so bright.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I felt that in times that we have had several conversation in regards to her practices, and I'm also a shamanic practitioner as well. So I definitely understand it. I understand all about that world, and being connected to the earth, and the spiritual energies surrounding that. And like I said, when I first saw that photo, I felt her radiance come through and across. So I'm so excited that you are here today on the show to share her continued light, and all the things that she has contributed to the earth, and that she's still doing through your work. And I'm just so grateful that you came on the show to share her story. You also stated that there is a in your bio, you were asked, when I was asking you during your bio some things about Emily, you did state this: there's a terrible stigma placed on women when relationships go bad. Can you clarify this for me so that my viewers can understand that a lot more?
oh, absolutely. I mean, I learned that even after having my daughter executed, there
Mm.
were still a community of people out there in, primarily in cyber world. I thank God don't have people close to my world that did this to me right up in my face, but the shaming that happens for someone, it's just not even, I still to this day have a hard time understanding how you can actually come to a conclusion when the bottom line is that the no one has the right to end someone's life,
Yeah.
right? Everyone has the right to stop a relationship. We should have that right. We don't own one another. And, if anybody, I'm certain, went about, trying to back out of a dating relationship that she'd had for a few weeks in a kind way, I am positive that it would have been my daughter. She she just did it wasn't for her. And the stigma surrounding, oh my, the things that were said and written on the internet about my child after this happened, I I didn't want to look, but I am, in hindsight, I'm glad I did, because it has helped me now to
Hmm.
feel strong. At that point, it would tear me down. Um, but I'm not that same person, and I'm not in that same, um, the sensitivity isn't the same, because I've able to intelligently realize that they are sick to be
Yeah.
thinking like that. But for
Hmm.
somebody to say, and especially, so Emily was a Caucasian woman. This is a Black male that she'd been dating. It, absolutely not a moment did any of that enter my radar, my family's radar. None of us thought about, as far as I was concerned, the person that did this to her, I could have come up with 10 other ways to describe him
Hmm.
before I'd have ever even gotten to that piece. But what I found was immediately that's where people were going. They were saying terrible things about staying in her race. And then they were saying things, oh, well, maybe if her parents taught her better, sounds like nobody educated her on, how to pick your dating partner. And the terrible things. And then there's this one time my brother, oh, he went on to one of these, and this was a learning experience, but he went in and tried to actually like be reasonable with these people that were saying terrible things, like, oh, well, she shouldn't have been seeing him to begin with. And how do you not know that, someone is, bad? And my brother tried to rationalize with these commenters and say, listen, I'm Emily's uncle. I just want to let that this is serious. She was the sweetest girl, and just kind of take this, like, try to bring it down,
Yeah.
and tell people that to remember that there are family out there reading this. And one of them turned and went after my brother in a sense and started blaming him too,
Wow.
for not being a better role model, and teaching her how to pick dating partners. And it was terrible. The blame that gets placed on women,
Hmm.
as a whole, I think has been there for a long time, and it's just gotten increasingly worse.
Yeah.
It's like that, the analogy of the, if you've, depending on what you're wearing, somehow that got you raped,
Right.
right? Like when people
Yeah.
say things about a woman's top or a woman's skirt, or the same scenario happened to me, even with my daughter, unrecognizable in a morgue.
Yeah.
People saying and blaming, and that's just not okay.
Yeah.
I think it happens to women in all sorts of abusive relationships, where they're blamed. Society is quick to say, like, well, why are they still there?
Yeah.
If the person's so bad, why are they there? As if they somehow enjoy it, or they're asking for it.
Hmm.
It's a real, it's a big, it's heavy on my heart.
Now, what was your life like prior to this trauma event, and how has this impacted your family?
Oh gosh, honestly, I thought I was doing a lot of things right before this happened, and I've come back to a place where I think I was, but the way that I'd been doing it didn't keep my child safe, didn't keep her from, becoming a homicide victim. So I was very quick to go inward on, where did I fall short? What
Mhm.
did I mess up along the way? So I was right there with, people are blaming my child for a violent death. I was blaming myself for not being able to keep her safe. And what did I do wrong, as far as how I started to doubt that magic in her, and that kindness, and that altruism, and get really down on myself, thinking, what did I do wrong? Like, if I would have raised her to be not a nice person,
Mhm.
to not be so open and not judgmental with who she was dating and
Yeah.
or friends with, would she be here?
Mhm.
Because maybe she would, if I just raised somebody that was a kind of a jerk to people, maybe this man wouldn't have been attracted to her. I
Yeah.
don't know. But for me, our lives, I was always, I would look at things with, the optimism, and that's been really hard to get back to,
Mhm.
especially as I've watched the condition of the world just continue to worsen every day. It's been really hard to get back to. And I have a young son who, I mean, to say that this has absolutely imploded our family, is just an understatement. In his entire sense of safety in the world was shattered. Um, for a little boy at 8 years old to have his first reaction to his mother and father telling him what someone had done to his sister,
Mhm.
for him at 8 years old to turn and say, why didn't she bring me with her? I could have kept her safe.
Yeah.
He's 8.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of kids I have, just that deep, deep love. And it's very quiet in my home now. It's very lonely. And we've all just been working on how to rebuild our lives, because there is a before and after. There's absolutely nothing that, in a practical way, that stays the same. My
Right.
career changed, everything changed,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. I get that. You've been a licensed clinician for many years. Now you're going through your own personal experience with trauma. What gaps in services have you discovered in receiving access to mental health support?
That has been what I believe is a very, very positive eye opener for me. As a licensed clinician, I've always been invested in, you know, underserved communities, like, or underserved areas of social work, I should say. And so, for me, like, my first experience with social work that made me decide to become a social worker was, ironically, volunteering at a women's center. And from there, I went, my first real social work job, I was a parenting educator,
Mhm.
and I would work with at risk um, families that hadn't had their children taken from them yet, but they were going to, because they were right on that cusp between risk and abuse.
Mhm.
And a lot of it had to do with education and supports and learning how to be a mother, learning what
Right.
basic needs were, learning how to not continue to put yourself first when you had children to take care of.
Yeah.
So, in doing all of that, I thought I had experienced a lot of different types of social needs. And I can tell you that what I have learned in the last 2 years about the lack of access and the lack of existing supports there for trauma
Mhm.
and grief that has nowhere to go are so few and far between. And if they're there, they are so hard to find, especially when you are incredulously depressed.
Yeah.
Um, it's been it's been very eye opening for me, to know how hard it is for me, who went into this trauma knowing how to do certain things because of my history and my career,
Mhm.
to, when I sit back and I put myself in the shoes of someone else who doesn't already know how to access certain things, I could just weep. My heart just it feels like it's just opening up, and it's just gonna bleed all over the place, because that additional pain and stressor of just, you're all alone, not everybody has family supporting them, not and then to not be able to find a resource. Um,
What did you do? What were you able to do as you were, combing through all of this mess to say, wait a minute, I can rely on what I know, but I'm still stuck between a rock and a hard place. So when you decided, no, I have to figure this out because I know I need the resources, what did you do?
Absolutely. I well, sadly, I live 7 miles from the tragedy at the Sandy Hook school.
Mm.
And over the years, there were kind of a lot of different grief services and things of that nature put into place after that horrible tragedy happened. And I would have people just kind of presuming that I was just going to be able to easily get supports. But even in this area that has had, this terrible inundation, grief and trauma, there was hardly a thing. When I finally got someone on the phone, I had called this center called the Resiliency Center, and I found, I mean, they did exactly what I needed from myself and my son, they worked with adults, they worked with kids, they did expressive arts, not just talk therapy, because he was refusing to talk. And I didn't know how to make the words come out of my mouth. So even as a talking professional, I
Yeah.
couldn't talk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just knew I couldn't get through this, through even the basic steps, the practical steps, without having someone to bounce it off of. And so I called, and only to find out that this was a grant funded program, and it was supposed to be just for the residents of Newtown who had gone through that terrible tragedy. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me.
Mm.
I begged and begged and begged. They were so kind. They weren't refusing to help me. They just had a grant to work within.
Right.
And, I begged, and I told them, I said, I've already called other places, and, they don't want people like me, like the typical grief groups and things. They didn't, I'm not what they're looking for. That was the equivalent of, dropping some kind of a an explosion in the middle of their grief group, because I was a homicide survivor, and that wasn't their usual right here in my community anyway. So
Yeah.
we were getting kind of brushed off and redirected no matter who I tried. Um, but I'm so grateful to say that the Resiliency Center did end up taking on helping me, and they were willing to help my son.
Mm.
Um, Luckily, right at that time, they were just starting to be able to take on people that weren't in the Newtown community, but it was like on a situational basis.
Yeah.
And then I found out that part of their grant came from the crime victims of crime compensation unit in the state of Connecticut. And so I was therefore entitled to that service even without
Right.
living there. But I
Mm.
mean, who has the stamina to have their child murdered and then go find out all that information? I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of like determination and energy that you don't have, and you know, having to talk to people time after time and tell what's happened, and then just to feel like you're some kind of an alien or a burden,
Yeah.
um, is terrible. So I have had a big reality check on access to services, and
So
I'm
let's
positive
let's go
they
over
may.
that again. Let's go over that again for individuals that have had cases like yours or homicide
Mhm.
and don't feel that they have um, support or don't know where to even begin. It starts first with you, right? It starts first with you. And then what are the other steps that you said? Having the resilience, continuing calling,
Yeah,
because this is I really want people to understand these are the things that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to show up for yourself first. You're going to have to
absolutely.
get that willpower, right?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and just share with me again some of the things that you did.
I had to call. I had to get online. I had to research places. I had to ask people, like, who helps people like me? Because even as a clinician, I myself I'd had experience working with children and families that had grief in their lives, but not traumatic grief like this.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even have my own answers. So you have to you have to get the wherewithal to know that you need some help. You have to know you're not okay. And so you have to somehow come to terms with that. And then you have to go that next step. You have to find something. So for me, I had to get online. So that meant that I needed to either have a phone, a computer, internet, whatever it is. I needed to start looking. Um, and time after time, when I was looking up just for grief support, those weren't the ones. Those were not the ones. Those were the ones that grandma had cancer and died, and it was very sad. But they were not trauma. They were not scary. They were not services for us.
Yeah.
And here I was thinking, oh my God, my son is getting deeper and deeper into the process of this. I can't make sense out of my own mind, let alone get in on his, even as a clinician. And I can't find him help.
Yeah.
And I mean, it took weeks. Emily was killed on December 9th, 2018. I think I was in talking to somebody the last week of January. So that's how long it took
Mm-hmm.
between getting my mindset in play and actually finding someone who said yes and then actually acted on it and like made an appointment with me and everything. And then I got to talk to somebody. So all that time had passed, which I guess for some, maybe that's not a lot of time. I've met people that their grief has stayed stacked for a very long period of time, and they
Yeah.
don't look for help.
Yeah.
For me, that was a very long time.
Yeah. Well, you listen to your body, and with also, of course, I'm sure with your, um, being a licensed clinician and understanding that, but still, even outside of the professional part, you listen to your body and what you needed in order to move forward. Because I think we're
That's huge.
what grieving is it's one of those things that um, you're not ready to work through it until you're ready to work through it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's just one of those things that we see as if I don't have the education behind what I'm needing to do for myself, I'm not going to look for it. But if you're a person that's really wanting to decide to do something differently, and I
Right.
know you've said that probably to some of your clients before, you in order for you to move
Gotta be,
forward, you
yeah,
have to want it for yourself.
absolutely.
And and I didn't mean to stop and pause here and take so
That's
much
okay.
time in this area, but because of the type of work that you and I do, I think it's imperative that other survivors that may listen and other individuals that have experienced trauma to realize and recognize that first you got to be willing to say, after adjust to what's happened as you stated, but I have to be the one in full force ready to be able to do something about this to change my outcome, because I can't live like feeling like this. It's difficult.
Yeah.
And also, like you said, to see your son that was
Yeah.
struggling. So
Yes.
I'm just grateful that you did decide as early on that you did to get the help that you and your family needed. Now I'm going to jump into your advocacy work because that's a huge part of your journey. Now, share what you have accomplished that increases safety for women.
Well, I certainly didn't stay quiet for very long when it came to kind of just. I mean, I felt like a caged animal. Like I had to talk. I had to rage. I had to talk. But yet you can't rage when you need someone to truly hear you and affect a change, right? So like I needed to also find a rational way to go about some of the things that needed to be done. Particularly, I'm sure they're nationwide, but I knew where the failures were in our state.
Hmm.
We had failures on behalf of the police, with Emily trying to access help the week before she was killed. So, I've started working with legislators. I know it's a work in progress, and it's going to take really continuing to go back every single time and fight and make them listen, and to meet other survivors and get them to try to want to use their voice,
Yeah.
to change 911 policies, the way people get treated when they call for domestic. um, there is absolutely no rationale to this on this earth that my daughter should have been on a 911 call for an hour and 22 minutes before anybody was dispatched. That's just no. That's not 911. So we're addressing that. We're addressing policy and procedure for 911. We've also started addressing. I had tried to start addressing really early on. I was kind of a lone ranger, I guess. I was trying to work with a few local legislators to address police accountability, and that I was truly felt like I was dying inside, trying to get somebody to understand that neglect is violence, and that the neglect my daughter was shown in calling 911, and the neglect by the police department to not take it seriously and to not pursue the situation until they got to an end result. Now, mind you, that was on November 30th. So that was 8 days before she ended up becoming a homicide victim. And so there's a whole lot of stuff in there that coulda, shoulda, woulda. And the bottom line is there's no accountability to make a police officer do A through Z.
Mhm.
If they skip a few letters in the alphabet at that point anyway, it's just considered a bad decision. And there's no ramification. So with some police officers, I'm not saying the majority by any stretch, but there are some that without that motivation, which is that you're going to have a consequence, they're not going to do it for various reasons that I don't know. I can only presume exhaustion, lack of empathy, overworked, whatever it is. But they didn't take it seriously, and my daughter's dead. And so I am going to continue to fight that fight, for very sad reasons after our nation, imploded and decided it was just simply wasn't going to have this anymore. When we all watched on national television having, George Floyd underneath the knee of a police officer, all of a sudden my own state too was up in arms about police behavior.
Mhm.
Something that had been going on for a long, long time, and it was not publicized, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't something that people knew until they knew. Much like with trauma and grief and all the things that go along, there's so much I wouldn't know because I didn't know. Even as somebody, in the helping profession. So I'm very committed to that. I gave some testimony last July. I'm happy to say that, through my testimony, along with, dozens of others, we do have a baseline reform policy in place here now for the justice and policing in Connecticut. It's received horrendous opposition from those that, don't support it. And it's sadly being drawn down as like, not caring about the police or, not backing our police. And that is absolutely not my perspective. My perspective is you are overburdened. That is evident in what happened to my child. So I want to make sure you get some more services because not everybody needs to know everything. You don't have to be an expert at everything. Clearly, they don't know how to handle domestic violence. They don't know how to handle red flag. They don't know how to handle mental health, things of that nature. So that's where my investment is in being part of this reform, is to say, like, first of all, let's put our egos down somewhere because they shouldn't be expected to know how to do everything. And if they can work as a team, then we can have a little bit of both, right? They can be the experts on protecting someone in a violent situation. Like, if I were on a call with someone and I was the mental health person or the domestic violence person, yeah, I mean, if it was a dangerous situation, I don't want to do that without a police officer with me. But until we get to a team mentality,
Yeah.
we're not going to have any of that, and more people are going to die.
Yeah.
So I'm committed to changing that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to quote you here. You said, dealing with the legal parts of this pain has been its own separate trauma that seems to get increasingly worse to navigate. What does this mean? And what are the injustices and the mistrust in this statement?
This has been truly, I can tell you that if I thought something was going to make me not be able to live, truly stay alive without both my children here with me on the earth, it has been dealing with the legal system. And it has been just absorbing this disregard for her human life. And along with that, what it's done to our family, and how if it's done it to my family, I'm quite certain it's done it to all those families. Now, I live in a rural area, but that's not where my child was killed. So I don't go to court in a rural area. I go to court in the city where she was killed, like a mile from where she was just killed and dumped. So I sit in court with families that are dealing with these crises as a far more regular part of their community. And it makes me so upset and so angry, because I know what I know about how hard it was for me to get help. I know how hard it is for me to be heard by the district attorney. You have to rage to get them to care, and it shouldn't be that way. When it comes to, everybody has their own position on whether or not, what's best for them, to work with the prosecutor, who, in my experience, is always looking to make some kind of a deal, and it makes things less taxing for them and less expensive, or whatever it does. But even if you're not on board with that, they just proceed with those things anyway. Like, you can talk and talk and talk, and you can think that they care and they're listening, and then you can find out, after some status conference that they've had with the other attorney and the judge, that they went ahead and they made a plea offer without caring what you thought about it.
Yeah.
We have had more than 20 court dates in 26 months where I have brought my 78-year-old mother to court because she won't have it any other way. Mm-hmm. Emily was everything to her. And we're still in the same. The only thing that's different than 26 months ago was that he got charged. We've had nothing, no progress, no anything. And then this is something that I recently talked to some new survivor moms that I've gotten to know, that one of the moms experienced the same thing as me. With COVID, it made everything worse, but I assure you, they were already way behind the 8 ball in dragging things out, and the amount of rights that the people that commit the crime have as a whole, let alone as opposed to the very little rights that the victims do. So by getting to meet this mom whose son was killed 10 months before my daughter in the same city, she and I both realized that we'd had the same additional trauma happen to us a couple months ago with the COVID, and the court shuts down. Usually there's this thing you can sign up for to get alerts about changes on the docket and when your next court date is. Now, I've had those all along, but they've come after I've been at court. So I knew they were coming, like I knew what the information would be.
Yeah.
So in the midst of this COVID, which in itself, forced isolation on someone who's a trauma survivor, and going through what my son and I, my family have been through, and that in itself wasn't a very difficult journey. But so when I say trauma from the legal system, I received a text message out of nowhere in September telling me that my trial was in 2025. Oh. 2025, which would make it 7 years from the time my child was killed. It would make my little boy 15. And honestly, immediately came to my mind that my mother would die before it happened, because she cannot live through this. And I found out just last weekend that another mother had gotten that same text, and she had that same feeling, and you just think you're going to die.
Yeah. Mm. That
The
is
weight is
heartbreaking
so
within
heavy.
itself. Yeah,
The
that is
weight
so
is so
heartbreaking.
heavy.
Yeah, I can
To,
only imagine.
and you can only, a couple of years start to finish, I guess, is like imaginable, and I guess like an average. But when you think about having to carry this piece
Mm.
for that long with no end result, I've stopped saying the word justice. I don't believe there's justice. I want accountability. I don't use the word justice talking about what this person did in the state I live, because the way they treat my child, like we're playing, a game at a casino. There is no justice.
Yeah.
I want accountability.
Yeah.
And that's the best that I can ask the universe for every day. Just
You're starting with you're very vocal about what your needs are. You've worked on some legislation, and you've also started, you're in the developmental stages, you stated, for forming a foundation in honor of Emily. Tell
yeah.
us about that.
Well, Emily's cousin, that lived up in Maine, shortly after Emily died, she's so sweet. She made this bumper sticker, and it was the coolest bumper sticker, um, that said, I wish I had one with me right now, but it said peace, love, and M. And then it said, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. Right. And that's Emily to a fault. And it was this rainbow tie dye. And
Yeah.
so she had them made, and she was selling them, with like a suggested donation for people. One, primarily because she wanted Emily to be all over everybody's cars. But the next piece is she wanted to be able to do something to help, Emily's biological father's side of the family up there where they lived in Maine. And it was such a beautiful gesture,
Yeah.
um, that I ended up printing some more and, giving them out to people down here. And somehow that peace, love, and M has it always stuck with me. And so I talked with her cousin. I asked her what she thought about, letting me kind of use a little bit of her language that she'd come up with, and of course she was all for it. So we started the process of a foundation that, the name will be Peace, Love, and M.
Mhm.
Um, and I've spent a lot of time this week trying to really hone in on exactly what that foundation's got to do, and it going to do, or what it needs to do. It can get really overwhelming because you see so many things that need attention
Right.
or fixing, or
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
know I have to come back to myself too, and I have to think about what will help me on my journey while it's doing something that honors Emily.
Absolutely.
Because I won't be any good if it just it draws and
Yeah.
draws and draws and doesn't put back, right? So I have to
Yeah.
kind of find that balance. But so far what we've done is, we, outside of starting the paperwork and everything for the nonprofit, like my sisters and I, we make all sorts of like different crafts and jewelry and things, and we've gone to events, and we've um, sold things, and then the monies that have come in, we've just used them for things, like made a donation to something in the community that would be meaningful to Emily.
Mhm.
Um, w- uh, I've bought a lot of trees. I've bought like just to into the preserve lands and things, just things that mean something to her.
Yeah.
Some equipment for a special needs, physical education program
Mhm.
that the kids, they're looking to integrate the kids with the regular ed kids, and they want to teach them things. And so we bought some balance bikes, it just things, but trying to really lean down, kind of come down on what's going to be my big picture, what will be something that just supports and continues on the magic of Emily in our community, but then also what is something that I can do
Yeah,
that may help someone else who was where I was and still can't get out,
absolutely.
because they don't have those
Yeah.
things,
I think a lot of times too, it's often that what, in the end, what we end up teaching is what we needed to learn ourselves. Um, and that kind of just turns into that defining purpose or the what we also needed as well in order
Yeah.
to give back to the earth. So I do truly believe, um, once everything developed and once you become the teacher of it and the director of it, that it's the one thing that of course that you learned or needed to learn, which are all of the services, because I was going to ask you who would be the ideal client or what services you would provide, and a lot of things that you're in need of, I'm sure, will be a part of what what will come from or what will develop as far as the programs and services. So, if you could you share a quote or a loving statement with our Grief Nation listeners and why you chose that?
Yeah, I was thinking on it during the week, between our first time speaking and then doing this today, and there's just been a few statements almost that have always stuck with me in the last 2 years. And one was this unique way that I stumbled upon this little sign thing that said it says be the light. Um, and so I've got a whole bunch of things that say that kind of all over my house. Um, and as of late, a message that has been coming to me, especially when I'm grounded and I'm meditating, or I'm sitting in M's room with her, many beautiful healing tools, is to trust my purpose. You
Yeah.
know, not to find it.
Mm-hmm.
It says trust my purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm looking to do now, is to just kind of continue to take all these things in and trust um, that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I've had
Yes.
some really unique things happen to me, when I've been using my voice, even with Moms Demand Action, and whether it's giving testimony or in the last few months, I've gone hard and heavy when it was election season on, drawing out the voting records for people that did not support domestic violence laws.
Mm-hmm.
And I have made it very clear that I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like I've been a little confused because Emily was so not a she didn't roar. She didn't need to.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't need to, but it's been more of who I am. And I think my daughter left the earth knowing that.
Mm-hmm.
She knew her mom was coming.
Yeah.
Her mom was coming back. You do not mess with my mom's
Yeah.
children. Um, and so I kind of fall back with that on trust my purpose,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, always leave people better than you found them. That's something that sticks with me. And I I have to just kind of focus on that no matter what situation I'm in, leaving them better
Absolutely.
than I found them.
I love that so much. That's that was along my journey as well, was trust the process, because
Absolutely.
um when I first started writing my book, The Key Process, because my son's name is Taiki. So um Taiki just always had this way of always losing something, which would he would always lose his keys. So and he would also often say to himself, "His wow, how is my name is
Because you
Taiki?
named him Taiki. Yeah.
He was like, how could I always leave my keys or lose my keys and my name is Taiki? But when I started writing the key process, a grief guide to mastering spiritual healing, I kept saying, the key process. But even though I was processing the process was key. And I
Mhm.
often write that when I autograph my books, right
Mhm.
under the key process, I write the process was key, because the process was key for me. The
Right.
process of me going through, and like you said, not
Don't
necessarily
skip any
finding
steps.
it. Right. It wasn't me finding my purpose. It was defining what I needed to do that was going to work best for me.
Yes.
And it changed over time. I would be this way one week and this way one month. But when I truly stumbled upon the spiritual work that helped ground me, like you have often talked about, and the healing aspect of what Emily was doing, and that was the changing moments and the defining parts of my life that switched everything for me. It was like this, you know, and
I'd
really
like
for
to have more people open up to that would be
yeah,
my hope for the world, right? That
me
more people
too.
realize that it's not a trade-off for believing in God or
Yeah.
using a Bible or
Hmm.
anything like that. It's not a trade-off.
Yeah.
I mean, uh, my daughter believed deeply in Jesus,
Yeah.
but there's just a bigger way to look at it. You
To
can kind of
express it.
evolve, and there's
Yeah.
just other things, but there's still. I think it's changing, but
Yeah.
I wonder how much it gets to enter the grief community,
Well, look
especially
how excited we
dramatically.
get when we start talking about it. Our whole body language change. We're happier.
Absolutely
We're
right. I'm
lifted.
like, oh, and then we can
Now
do
we're talking spirit talk. We love
because
it. We love
honestly,
it.
Miami, when we talked earlier this week, and we talked a little bit about me trying to think about my foundation. Of all things, I had to have a CAT scan yesterday, and I had to be enclosed.
Yeah.
It was really, really, really hard.
Hmm.
Beyond hard. I would call it borderline traumatizing, but it was for the right reasons, and I knew I had to do it. So, but while I was there, I was actually able to. I started thinking about our talk the other night, and I was able to kind of like ground myself down. I did some breathing, brought myself to a place, told myself under no uncertain terms, are you opening your eyes until you're out of this machine? But while I was there, I started to have like this clarity about what it would look like if I was doing exactly what felt good and solve some of the things that are issues and help some people with their pain. So I was immediately thinking about trees, and I was in the forest, and I was thinking about, whoa, maybe I could help people be able to plant a tree for their loved one. And oh wow, look at that. I mean, that's something that I've done numerous
Yeah.
times. Like,
Yeah.
we have trees planted in numerous places, and we also donate trees, and we buy trees for the national forest, and I'll fundraise for different things and say, oh, it's so and so's birthday. I'd really just like for you to do this, buy a tree. But I thought to myself, wow, what a great way to be able to help somebody memorialize
Hmm.
their child in a less formal way,
Wow.
because the reality is the formal way is also incredulous in cost,
Hmm.
and it's not realistic for a lot of people, and they feel terrible about it.
Yeah.
So I started thinking about that, and then I was thinking about my crafting and things that we do just to heal ourselves, and
Hmm.
all the different things that Emily, like, she made everything. I mean, it was incredible how way she could express through art and crafting. But I thought to myself, whoa, I could I could like talk to a bereaved human, and they could tell me about their child. I could make them something, and then they
Wow.
could have this thing like, so right here I have on a piece of jewelry here, and it's a piece of china sea
Hmm.
glass that
Okay.
came from the coast of Maine. Emily made this,
Okay.
So
It's
like
beautiful.
she'd made this is just what I chose today. I'm always into her things, but it's just like a wire wrapped thing
Yeah.
with, whatever she was feeling at that moment. It's got the green tones in it. And I thought to myself, how nice would it be to be able to sit and have coffee with someone and learn a little bit about their child and make them something,
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely.
And then I went even a little further and I thought, wow, when we turn the bend from COVID, maybe I could teach people how to make it
Hmm.
and just be part of like that process, just all these different things started coming to mind. And, then the practical pieces like, well, what would you need? And,
Hmm.
and I was like, well, I really wouldn't need much. I'm pretty like low,
Yeah.
I'm low maintenance on things. I'm like, I'd need a space. And then I started thinking, I'm like, well, a space would be good for me because it's not always the best thing for me to be home all the time. So, having like a small space to be able to use,
Yeah.
just all these different things. When I really truly had to go into myself the other day to face my fears
Uh-huh.
of having that assessment done, all of it just started flooding like I started weeping because it was like weeping and I wasn't unhappy,
Yeah.
but it was just such a relief that my mind got clear for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I'm so excited and happy to hear that because I know the exercise that we did the day before.
oh,
Well,
yes, and we'd done that, thank goodness, not even knowing that I was gonna have to go into this situation
look,
where I
so
was going to
look,
have to really bring
right.
myself to a place
Uh,
of
it
comfort.
just warms my heart when I share the work that I do. A lot of people, because they don't understand the world of shamanism, or they don't understand the world of mastering spiritual healing. When I even talk about the programs that I offer, or just having a consultation with or discovery sessions, or
Right.
whatever we call them. um a lot of times people don't really know how they have actually been able to tap
Mhm.
into that their self-conscious mind and the conscious mind. And then, like you
Right.
said, when that was accompanied with fear, you were
Absolutely.
actually able to tap into it. And I'm
Yep.
just so glad that you shared that with me, because it helps me realize that the work that I'm doing is
Oh,
real.
it's so real and so valuable. I don't think that I would have been able to I'd have gotten through my assessment that I needed to have done, the CAT scan, but I would have just laid there in fear. And it would have been
Mm.
like, the fear, the fear. And I wouldn't have had that recent experience with you to really, really help me do something good.
Yeah.
And just give myself that time to just go real deep,
Yeah.
to ask Emily, to tell me like my, what do you think? And,
Yeah.
and,
And it
and
came
then
right out of you. It just
saying to her
poured
like, well,
out of you.
how does mommy go about this without being pushy
Yeah.
with people and telling them where they're at in their grief? How does mommy put this out there so that people will come, but
Hmm.
yet it won't discount people that they don't know how to put that first step forward. So I
Yeah.
started thinking in all these broad things. And just as soon as I got out of that machine, I started jotting down notes,
Yeah.
um, of
Good for
things
you.
to keep kind of building on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
meantime, like we craft away. We make dream catchers and I mean, so many different things with all different stones in them. And none of us, my sisters and I, it's not been for any kind of profit. It's just a matter of it helps us heal.
Yeah.
There's a connection to Emily in doing it.
Hmm.
Quite often when we're crafting, we're in her room, using her candles and her music, whatever it may be, and we've just used it to put good back out into the community.
Yeah, but that's
Um,
who she was. I mean,
Absolutely.
art expression, and it's just those are the things that who she was, and it kind of it puts you, and I'm sure by making some of these things and developing, new ideas, and like you said, being able to help someone else, a family member, when they're talking about their loved one, to create something. And in creating is just, it opens up a whole world of love and light to come in.
Absolutely.
That is so beautiful. I'm so excited that you had that experience, and that it's gonna, further develop, what you're gonna do with the foundation. So how can others reach you? How, where are you, on
Well,
social media?
within the next day or two, we're going to take my website from edit mode to actually making it published.
Okay.
So the website will be www.peacelovem. So just peace, love, em,
Okay.
no capitals.org. So, and in addition to that, I have Peace, Love, and M on Facebook. And then I also have Peace, Love, and M on Instagram.
Okay.
So we've made those separate things. And, it's mostly just been for sharing about Emily. I hope that somebody, you know, looks on sometime and says, oh, like maybe I could try to do that. Or, because I'm very, very open
Yeah.
about the different stages of what it is like to walk this walk. And sometimes I think, oh gosh, no one wants to hear this again, Debbie Downer, or whatever it is. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, even if that's their perspective, shame on them, because I wish I could be so lucky to not understand me, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
You don't want to trade. So, if I look at it and I think, well, I'm here, my voice is more than it ever was. I have to represent, I have to carry Emily with me, and
Right.
I have to live a life. I have to spend a very long time making my son know that he is not any less important alive than she is deceased. That is a tough line to toe, right? Because grief
Mhm.
just, and you have other children, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
right? You know what I mean.
I know what
And
you mean.
I thought to myself, how can this boy's legacy be to just slowly watch his mom just disintegrate,
Yeah.
and he knew, he's keenly aware of how much I love my kids.
Yeah.
And then his this terrible tragedy happens to his sister, and then all of a sudden I'm not like loving on him the way that I always did. And I couldn't possibly, that has been really hard to do at times when things feel really dark, but it's definitely something that I bring myself back to, that statement over and over again.
Mhm.
Like, he cannot grow up feeling less important than she is. He
Yeah.
can't.
Oh, I feel
Um,
that. I remember when I read that, in your notes, I immediately understood exactly what you meant. I have a younger son, that's in the military, and, well, all of my children are adults, and that really resonated with me, for him being the other son that I have, because I have three daughters and two sons, and it resonated with me because he's also the youngest, but yet all of my mission and power and love, of course, has been going to the dedication of me building what I have. And sometimes that could come across that way, that, well, what about me? I'm still here. You know what I'm saying? It can come across to my daughters as well.
well, and then, the bad part of that is, they can start, when you're not seeing them,
Yeah.
they can start acting it out.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
then,
And we're not the only families that this happens to. It
no,
happens to all of us. You know what I'm
no,
saying? I
it's
mean,
got to be
because
other
you're
families. It has to
going,
be.
going, going. You're trying to get through. First of all, you're still you're still trying to receive justice. Still trying to go through that whole process of the legal system. So everything is still right now of you trying to, make sure that
Yeah,
you have some resolution behind
yeah,
this tragedy that has occurred to your life. And then there's the building your foundation part. And then
right,
there's the, still working through your own entire
Yeah.
grief behind
And
it. And
saving face for my son,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And it's
And
still like, oh, it's difficult. It's trust me, I totally understand.
yeah.
And we could be here all over for forever with with just that particular conversation on our other children. But leave us with a sweet memory of Emily and then let me know what's your call to action.
Emily. She's just the sweetest, sweetest, sweetest little girl. I have so many fond memories of her and how gentle she always was, how loving and gentle with her grandparents. I mean, it it was like she was playing with an 8-year-old. Like she just loved to spend time with her family. She loved her family so much. Um, when I think about Emily, I have so many the sweetest memories, and one that I always come back to when I talk about her as a healer,
Mm-hmm.
and how I definitely knew at a young age, early on. I was young myself, so I may not have fully processed it, but when Emily was just shy of 5 years old, we were living at my mother's house. I had um, decided to go to college and try to, get my own skill set together. And so she was kind of raised with a village by my sisters who were still, they're younger than me. They were still finishing up high school. And my mom was there and Em lived there. And so the great part is she never even once in her life had a non-family childcare provider. She was just either with family or with her mother. So I remember my mom founded this animal welfare society here for, mistreated animals back in the 70s. Okay, so she was a co-founder of that. And with that came our whole lives growing up with all sorts of animals that nobody wanted. Um, so my mom had a lot of cats, and with cats come mice.
Mm-hmm.
So at 5 years old, Emily could not understand, one, why the cat would kill the mouse, and two, she didn't understand the permanency of death.
Mm.
Um, and not only so much that she didn't understand it, I think she wouldn't accept it
Yeah.
because as a little girl, she would, get paper towel and she would put the mouse in a box and she would wrap it up and she would say a little prayer and she thought the mouse was coming back. And, so from an early age, something that was completely meaningless in her big world. I mean, it's mouse, but there was that ability to care for something that wasn't doing anything for
Yeah.
her, right? Like that altruism, like that, just that general compassion and true empathy and wanting to heal.
Yeah.
So when I think back about her and I think about how she ended up on the path that she's on, I still have days where I remain real angry that her path was stopped so short. But I do think she's still here working. It's just that
Yeah.
she's working from a much higher place,
Mm-hmm.
and she's helping to kind of implode some of the terrible things in this world, and she's not going to stop helping to shake it up until we all change it down here.
Yeah.
Um, and in part of that, when I think about Emily and how she cared for those little mice, I kind of just think about how I feel, how I've been up at night, just sick to my stomach, knowing there are people out there that must feel as bad as I do, and they need someone to talk to. And how do our worlds collide? How do we make that happen where everybody's in their own little box? How do we care about people that we don't have to care about? Because I want to care about them and I want them to care about me. And then we get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and then maybe we can make something change. But when I need to really get my self-centered and think about that's something I always go back to. Just that piece of her that she really at 4.5 years old thought she could bring a mouse back to life. She did the same thing with birds. She did, just it was
Yeah.
it's pretty remarkable.
Wow.
Um, the
Thank you.
selflessness.
Thank you for sharing Emily's life with us, with my Grief Nation listeners, and just sharing your day, remembering her spirit and that's still here, still supporting us, still guiding us to do what's right in the world, um, and having hope in dark places that are just a part of our world. But through her and through the work that I know that you're going to be doing, it's going to help so many people. So thank you for your gifts, and for the journey of what occurred with Emily, and all the great things that she continued to be, to you and your family and to all of us. Um, what's your call to action?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think what my call to action today is for uh, it's kind of a it's got a little bit of a few things combined together. Is one thing is for people to be part of the change. And I don't mean sitting home talking about it while you're watching the news. I mean find one thing that matters to you, get involved. Don't just talk about it. Find out more about it, and then find out who to contact about it. We all have our things that really stand out to us, and I think we have a lot of people that are compassion fatigued. They just don't even know what to do. But I can tell you that you're putting our world in danger if you don't do something. Because here I am, and you are, Miami. I mean, bereaved mothers fighting the fight,
Yeah.
and there's so many of us fighting the fight. We need people to come with us, just to
Yeah.
stand up to the atrocities. I don't mean they have to go deal with legislation. I don't mean that they have to put on a Red Mom's the Man shirt. Nothing like that. We just need you to stand up, to have our back. If we're at the forefront of it, because our pain is so raw that we can get the attention to make those changes, but we need you to get behind us, and we need you to stay. And that is something that I talked about recently, is how much people that are in trauma, how it never goes away. There is no typical grief stages that apply. How could it possibly? You don't ever stop loving your child. And so therefore, unless your love dies, your grief doesn't die. You have to learn how to live with them side by side. So my other call to action is for people to check on their friends. Check on your friends, check on your neighbor, check in with your social service department, and find out if there's someone that just needs some love. I think we can save lives this way. I think that, it's very, very easy to be succumb with darkness, with so much going on in the world. And then if you add other things into it, you never know what someone's going through.
Yeah.
And how much of an impact that one little thing can do, and how you can, without very much effort at all, leave somebody better than you found them. And that's something really important to me, as it was to Emily, is to just do something that improves someone's life in some way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I truly appreciate your time today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening and tuning in today to Jennifer Lowler, and allowing her to come share her story on her beautiful daughter Emily. And thank you once again for sharing this space with
Thank
me today.
you,
It is,
Miami. It's so nice to meet someone that I believe the intervention of Emily and Taiki had a little bit to do with that. I think
yes.
they collided our worlds for a reason. I definitely believe that.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Well, there you have it, Grief Nation listeners, and thank you for tuning in to another transformative segment on It's the Miami Night Show, Grief Talk. Today we give thanks filled with love and gratitude for our special guest, Jennifer Lawler, for expressing your very unique grief journey and sharing ways of understanding the healing process. This is your girl, Miami Night, with much love and light until we connect again spiritually. Bye-bye.
Going slow mo.
He's got me talking that grief time.
Going slow mo.
He's got me clocking out. It's the Miami Night Show.
Hey, yeah.
Slow mo.
He's got me walking that Greek walk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me talking that Greek talk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me clocking away.
What up, tribe? It's Miami Night Show, Master Grief Coach. Welcome to the Miami Night Show. You got me walking that Grief walk. It's time for Grief Talk, y'all.
I talk about things you think about.
It's Miami Night Show, Master Grief Coach.